Welcome to Left Africa.
Imagine for a second, right, that your house is just completely infested with termites.
Oh, man. A nightmare.
Yeah, absolute nightmare. Like, they are in the floorboards, they're in the walls, they're literally chewing through the very foundation of your home.
Right.
So you do what anyone would do. You call in an elite exterminator, and they show up with, state-of-the-art gear, march right down into the basement, and they successfully smash the queen termite.
Which sounds like a win.
Right. But then they immediately pack up their truck, hand you a bill that says mission accomplished, and just drive away. And meanwhile, the walls are literally still crumbling around you.
Yeah, it's not exactly solving the problem.
Not at all. Okay, let's unpack this, because we have a massive paradox on our hands today. Our mission for this deep dive is to cut through the official narratives and, separate the security theater from the absolute ground reality of a major breaking story.
And it is a major one.
It really is.
Mm-hmm.
As of today, July 4, 2026, the United States is officially withdrawing its military forces from Nigeria.
What's fascinating here is the massive disconnect between what is being said at the podium in Washington and what is actually happening in the dirt.
Right.
You had the U.S. military framing this exit as this textbook victory. They eliminated a major terrorist leader, so, they're packing up and heading home.
Mission accomplished.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you look at the raw data coming out of northeastern Nigeria right now, the violence hasn't stopped at all. The fire is still raging.
Yeah, and to get to the bottom of this, we are pulling from a really comprehensive stack of sources for you today. We've got an in-depth LeftAfrica production dossier, official statements from U.S. Africa Command, or AFRICOM.
Which are very revealing, by the way.
Super revealing. Plus data from the Council on Foreign Relations and on-the-ground reporting from Reuters, BBC Africa, and Human Rights Watch.
It's a lot to sift through.
It is. And to really grasp why the U.S. is packing its bags this month, we need to, rewind the tape a bit. We have to go back to the climax of what has basically been a decade-long military partnership.
Yeah, a partnership that really accelerated back in 2014, right after Boko Haram kidnapped the Chibok schoolgirls.
Right, but the real crescendo of this whole relationship happened just recently. It started around the Christmas Day strikes of 2025. What actually happened there?
So December 25, 2025, that represented this just unprecedented level of joint military action between the U.S. and Nigeria.
Like stuff we hadn't seen before.
Never at this scale. You had U.S. unmanned aerial systems, most likely MQ-9 Reapers, working in direct, real-time coordination with Nigerian Air Force Alpha jets.
Wow.
Yeah, and over the course of 72 hours, they executed 6 confirmed really heavy strikes against logistics hubs and command and control positions.
And this was targeting ISWA, right? The Islamic State West Africa province.
Exactly. ISWA positions deep in the Sambisa forest and out on the remote islands of Lake Chad.
I want to pause there for a second because, we hear terms like joint airstrikes all the time in the news. But how does that coordination actually work in an environment like the Sambisa forest?
It's tough.
Right. It's not like hitting a concrete building in the middle of a flat desert.
No, it is an incredibly complex logistical puzzle. The Sambisa forest has this dense, multi-layered canopy. You can't just, drop a bomb based on a general map coordinate.
Because you can't see anything.
Exactly. You need persistent surveillance to track movement under those trees. So the U.S. MQ-9 Reapers, they have these advanced electro-optical and infrared sensors.
Okay.
So they can loiter up there for hours just mapping out patterns of life. They essentially act as the eyes and the laser pointers for the whole operation.
So they're just circling, waiting for the right moment.
Right. They identify the hidden ISWA logistics hubs, laser designate the targets, and then they pass that data directly to the Nigerian Alpha jets that are coming in hot to drop the actual munitions.
That sounds incredibly difficult to time perfectly.
It requires absolute seamless communication. You've got U.S. drone operators potentially sitting thousands of miles away at a console talking directly with Nigerian pilots in the cockpit.
That is wild. And according to the Nigerian military, there were 0 civilian casualties from those strikes.
Though our sources do note that independent verification is nearly impossible.
Right, given how totally restricted that area is. But here's my question. If that air campaign in December was so incredibly effective, why did the U.S. suddenly feel the need to risk putting actual boots on the ground just 2 months later?
Well, because air power can really only degrade a network. It rarely finishes the job. especially, when you are hunting very specific leadership targets.
You need someone on the ground.
Exactly. So in February 2026, the U.S. deployed roughly 200 troops. These were mostly Green Berets and specialized support personnel.
And they went where, exactly?
They set up at a forward operating base near Baga, right on the Lake Chad shoreline. And their official mission designation was Advise, Assist, Accompany.
Okay, the accompany part is the major shift there. Yeah.
Crucially, yes. Up until that point, much of the U.S. involvement was strictly advisory.
Like looking at screens in a tent somewhere.
Exactly. Looking at intelligence feeds safely inside a command center. Accompany means these U.S. forces are actively moving outside the wire with Nigerian frontline units.
So they are out there in the mix.
Yeah, they are providing direct, tactical combat support, medical evacuation capabilities, and real-time intelligence for this highly targeted manhunt.
And that manhunt actually pays off a few months later, in April 2026.
It does.
The joint operation successfully tracks down and kills the emir of ISWA, Abu-Bilal al-Minuki.
Right, and the sources note his real name is actually kind of disputed.
Yeah, some call him Aminu Bama, others say it's Shu'aibu Moniki. But there is absolutely zero dispute about his rank. He was the top guy.
The absolute head of the snake.
Yeah.
Both AFRICOM and the Nigerian Defense Headquarters confirmed this was the first time an ISWA emir was killed with direct U.S. ground troop involvement.
Wow.
Yeah. From a purely tactical kinetic standpoint, the execution was flawless. They utilized that advanced drone intelligence we talked about, paired it with the Green Berets on the ground, and successfully decapitated a major regional terror network.
Which brings me right back to my exterminator analogy.
The queen termite.
Yes. You smash the queen termite, you hand it over the bill, and Washington is currently sending out all these press releases claiming ISWA's leadership is degraded and the operation is a massive success.
Right.
But if the queen is dead, why is the house still falling apart? Because the data from the Council on Foreign Relations and Sahara reporters paints a very, very grim picture of July 2026.
It really does. The violence hasn't stopped.
Not at all. The attack frequency in Borno, Yobe, and Adamawa states hasn't dropped a single bit. They are still seeing like 15 to 20 attacks every single month. That is the exact same tempo as before the Green Berets even landed.
Yeah, and the underlying flaw in this whole decapitation strategy is a fundamental misunderstanding of how organizations like ISWA actually function.
How do you mean?
Well, we tend to view them through the lens of a traditional military hierarchy, right? A pyramid where if you remove the general at the top, the battalions below just fall into chaos.
Like cutting off the head of a conventional army.
Exactly. But ISWA operates much more like a franchise model or, like a Hydra.
Okay, so how does that franchise model actually work on the ground when the top leader suddenly disappears?
So when al-Minuki was killed, it didn't trigger a total collapse of the command structure. It really just triggered an accelerated promotion cycle.
Next man up.
Exactly. The mid-level commanders, who already control their own localized revenue streams through extortion, kidnapping, taxes, they simply step up to fill the void.
So they don't even need the top guy to keep operating.
Not really. We saw the exact same phenomenon back in 2021 when the former leader, al-Barnawi, died. The regional cells operate with such a high degree of autonomy, so removing the symbolic head doesn't stop a local commander from ordering an attack on a village the very next day.
Man. Not to mention, this entire massive joint operation was solely focused on ISWA.
Right, entirely on ISWA.
Our sources point out that the JAS faction wasn't even targeted. Can you clarify for the listener who JAS is and how they fit into this whole messy picture?
Sure. So JAS stands for Jama'atu Alis-Sunnah Lidawati wal Jihad. They are essentially the original core faction of Boko Haram.
The ones founded by Muhammad Yusuf.
Exactly. Years ago, the group fractured. ISWA broke off, aligned itself with the broader Islamic State, and they focused more on attacking military targets and trying to establish a pseudo-government.
Got it. And what about JAS?
JAS remained fiercely independent. They're often far more brutal towards civilians, honestly, and they operate under their own entirely separate command center.
Okay, so let me get this straight. The U.S. and Nigeria spent all these resources, risked American lives, hunting the ISWA emir, while the JAS faction continues to operate entirely untouched by this specific deployment.
Completely untouched.
That is wild. And while the military is totally focused on hunting high-value targets deep in the forest, you have these massive, incredibly vulnerable displaced persons camps in places like Maiduguri, Monguno, and Dikwa.
Which are huge targets.
Massive. And the LeftAfrica dossier highlights that these camps remain largely unsecured. The Nigerian military is just struggling with severe morale, equipment, and logistics deficits across the board.
It is a profound mismatch of resources.
Yeah.
The Nigerian military has even had to redeploy some troops away from the Lake Chad perimeter recently.
Which just stretches everything even thinner.
Exactly. It's stretching an already thin security net to the absolute breaking point. You have hundreds of thousands of displaced civilians left totally exposed because the military is prioritizing offensive manhunts over defensive territorial security.
So what does this all mean? Like, did AFRICOM actually think 200 U.S. troops could secure a region larger than the Netherlands?
No, of course not.
So was this always just a symbolic deployment designed to grab a headline back home?
It really comes down to scope versus objective. 200 Green Berets are mathematically incapable of providing territorial security for an area the size of the Netherlands.
Right.
But they are incredibly lethal at specialized, narrow missions, like hunting in a mirror.
So it did exactly what it was supposed to do.
Yes. The deployment was designed to achieve a specific kinetic effect, a high-profile kill, not to solve the regional security crisis. But, when that narrow mission concludes, the broader vacuum of instability remains.
Okay, but if they knew 200 troops couldn't secure the region, and they can clearly see the violence is still raging, then the military job obviously isn't finished.
You're not even close.
Which tells me there has to be another reason the U.S. is packing up so suddenly right now.
And that leads us away from the battlefield and straight into a diplomatic fracture.
Here we go.
Behind closed doors, the relationship between Washington and Abuja had become incredibly toxic. In late 2024 and early 2025, a major diplomatic row erupted over a completely different conflict zone in Nigeria.
Right, the Middle Belt.
Exactly. Officials within the U.S. State Department, heavily lobbied by several Republican members of Congress, began lightly accusing the Nigerian government of failing to protect Christians in the Middle Belt region, specifically in Plateau, Benue, and Kaduna states.
And the terminology they used was explosive. The U.S. side started officially labeling the violence as Christian genocide or religious cleansing.
What? Very heavy words.
Extremely. They were pointing to a devastating pattern of church burnings, village massacres, and the mass displacement of Christian farmers, primarily at the hands of Fulani herders and jihadist factions.
Right.
But before we get into the politics of that label, can we just get an ELI 5 on what is actually driving that specific conflict in the Middle Belt? Like, why is this happening?
At its core, it is a conflict driven by climate change and resource scarcity, which has then been hijacked by ethnic and religious identities.
Okay.
So the Sahara Desert is expanding southward, and Lake Chad has shrunk drastically over the last few decades. The Fulani people, who are predominantly Muslim, are traditionally nomadic cattle herders.
So they need water and land for their herds.
Exactly. As their traditional grazing lands in the north dry up and just turn to dust, they are forced to drive their massive cattle herds further south to find water and pasture.
And that pushes them directly into the Middle Belt, which is basically the agricultural breadbasket of Nigeria, populated largely by sedentary Christian farming communities.
Precisely. You have cattle destroying crops, farmers retaliating against the herds, and then herders attacking the farming villages. It is fundamentally a war over land and water.
But it gets twisted.
It does. Opportunists, political figures, and extremist groups weaponize the demographic differences of Muslim herder versus Christian farmer, and they transform a resource dispute into a holy war narrative.
Which brings us back to Washington. By slapping the label of genocide on this, U.S. politicians basically forced a domestic political narrative onto a really complex ecological and security crisis.
Yes, they did.
How did the Nigerian government receive that accusation?
Abuja categorically and officially rejected the label. Nigeria's Foreign Minister Yusuf Tuggar called it genocide, framing both inflammatory and entirely inaccurate.
They were not having it.
Not at all. The government's stance is that acknowledging it as a resource conflict weaponized by bandits is accurate. But calling it a state-sponsored or tolerated religious genocide is a profound insult to their sovereignty.
And it wasn't just the government pushing back, right? Our sources note that even the Christian Association of Nigeria, or CAN, was internally divided on this.
Yeah, that was a really interesting detail.
Right. Some leaders within CAN felt the genocide label was a massive overstatement that completely erased the Muslim victims who were being slaughtered by the exact same bandit groups in neighboring areas.
Right, because the violence is somewhat indiscriminate.
Exactly. But then other leaders within the association felt it accurately reflected the targeted persecution they were experiencing in their specific communities.
This raises an important question, though, about the fragility of international security partnerships. The accusation of genocide, essentially poisoned the well. Nigerian officials privately viewed this U.S. framing as a politically motivated tool. They saw it as red meat for domestic religious constituencies in the U.S. rather than a serious geopolitical assessment.
So it's just politics to them.
Exactly. And once that label was applied, maintaining U.S. troops in the country became politically untenable for Abuja. It drastically accelerated the withdrawal timeline we're seeing right now.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Just think about the immense irony of that.
Yeah.
You have elite soldiers risking their lives in the Sambisa forest, orchestrating these incredibly complex drone strikes, successfully taking out top-tier terrorist leaders.
Doing the hard work on the ground.
Right. But ultimately, the trigger for the withdrawal wasn't pulled on the battlefield. It was pulled in a debate over terminology thousands of miles away in Washington.
It's pretty staggering.
The diplomats effectively ended the mission before the generals could even attempt to finish the job.
Which forces us to look beyond the borders of Nigeria, because this breakdown between Washington and Abuja is not an isolated incident at all.
No, it's a pattern.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this specific withdrawal is really just the latest domino in a staggering continent-wide retreat by Western powers.
Yeah, let's look at the data on that retreat because it's pretty wild. AFRICOM, the U.S. Africa Command, is currently operating on what they officially call a light footprint model.
Very light.
They requested a $2.7 billion budget for fiscal year 2026, but they are commanding this entire continental operation out of Stuttgart, Germany.
Right, from Europe.
Yeah.
What?
Following the U.S. withdrawal from Niger in 2023, the U.S. military has 0 permanent bases left on mainland Africa.
They are relying almost entirely on over-the-horizon logistics and just small advisory teams.
So what does over-the-horizon actually mean in practical terms? Because it sounds like a sleek military buzzword, but how does it impact operations on the ground?
In practical terms, it means extreme logistical friction. If you don't have a base in Niger or Nigeria, you have to launch a surveillance drone from thousands of miles away, perhaps from a base in Southern Europe or the Middle East.
Just to get to the battlefield.
Right. And that drone burns a massive amount of fuel just getting to the target area in West Africa, which drastically reduces its loiter time, the amount of time it can actually spend circling above a forest looking for targets.
So you're losing effectiveness.
Tremendously. It introduces massive delays in intelligence gathering. And worse, you lose the human intelligence networks you build when you are physically embedded in a local community.
Because you're just not there anymore.
Exactly. It is a posture of remote management, and it is highly, highly inefficient for counterinsurgency.
And it is happening everywhere. In the past, people described this like a game of Jenga where you pull out pieces until the tower falls.
Right?
But looking at the sources, a better analogy might be a pressurized pipe network. Insurgencies are like water. They flow to the path of least resistance.
That is a much more accurate way to view the Sahel right now.
Because when France was forced to end Operation Barkhane, getting pushed out of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger after a string of military coups, they essentially uncapped the pressure valve in the north.
Completely opened it up.
Then the U.S. loses its massive drone base in Niger in 2023. Another valve opens. They pull forces from Somalia in 2024. And now, in 2026, they pull the troops out of Nigeria.
It's a cascade.
By removing these forces, you aren't just leaving a void, you are opening a valve that funnels the insurgency directly into new territories.
Because nature abhors a vacuum, and geopolitics is no different.
Right.
When Western forces pull back and uncap those valves, someone else steps in to control the flow.
Yeah.
We are already seeing the Wagner Group, which is now rebranded as Africa Corps, operating heavily in Mali and Burkina Faso.
And they are ruthless.
Oh, totally. They have thousands of personnel on the ground providing brutal, unconditional security assistance to those juntas. And they are actively negotiating with the junta in Niger right now.
Now, to be clear, the LeftAfrica dossier emphasizes that Nigeria has not invited Wagner in.
That's an important distinction.
It is. Abuja still maintains partnerships with the UK and the EU. But the reality of geography doesn't care about official invitations, does it?
Not at all.
Nigeria's northern borders are incredibly porous. With the French gone and the Americans leaving, weapons, displaced fighters, and radical ideology are flowing freely across the Sahel directly into Nigeria's northern flank.
This is the ultimate danger of what we discussed earlier. It's tactical wins without strategic consolidation.
Win the battle, lose the war.
Exactly. You can win the firefight, you can use a drone to kill the emir, but if you abandon the region and allow the diplomatic relationship to shatter, you leave the door wide open
Yeah.
You allow resurgent militant groups and entirely new geopolitical players like Russian state-backed private military contractors to fundamentally rewrite the security architecture of the entire continent.
It is a profound shift. And, if you were reading these headlines over your morning coffee, a phrase like mission accomplished sounds incredibly reassuring.
It sounds great.
It does. But as we've seen today, taking a major terror leader off the board, while a real tactical achievement, doesn't fix the foundation of the house.
The termites are still there?
The termites are still there. The underlying climate and resource instability driving this conflict hasn't gone anywhere. The diplomatic toxicity has severed vital intelligence pipelines, and the regional power vacuums are yawning wide open, just pulling the violence across borders.
Yeah, the true impact of this July withdrawal won't be measured by the successful airstrikes of the past, but by how the Nigerian state manages the immense pressures of the immediate future, all without its primary security partner.
Which leaves us with one final, incredibly provocative thread to pull on, something that wasn't deeply covered in the official statements, but you really need to think about.
What's that?
Next year, 2027, Nigeria holds its general elections.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Security isn't just a talking point. It is the defining campaign issue for millions of voters. How is the ruling party going to spin the sudden departure of American troops?
That's going to be tough.
And furthermore, as Western forces retreat entirely and the violence continues to flow down from the Sahel, could a desperate Nigerian government eventually feel forced to sit down and negotiate directly with the very same jihadist factions the U.S. just spent the last decade trying to destroy?
It's a very real possibility.
It is a jarring prospect, but, when the exterminator leaves and the walls are still falling down, you have to figure out a way to survive in the house. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the geopolitical deep end. Keep questioning the official narratives, stay curious, and we will catch you on the next one.